I wanted to share some of the nuggets that I found in this book. There are a few things that I did not agree with Orson Scott Card on. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalie, and I'm an author and a growth marketer. And I'm currently, back to school, studying at university. And one of the classes I'm taking is how to write fantasy stories. One of the books that I've been reading for the class is How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy by Orson Scott Card. If you haven't read it yet, it is a quite comprehensive book on, the history of... It touches the history of fantasy and sci-fi, but it also talks a lot about how to become a writer long term. And I wanted to share some of the nuggets that I found in this book. There are a few things that I did not agree with Orson Scott Card on. Let's start with that, actually. In the book, Card says that, you have to create a hard magic system. And if I remember correctly, according to him, you can't choose whether to have both a soft and a hard. You have to choose one or the other. And in Brandon Sanderson's creative writing class, he says that you can actually have both, and that a lot of books have both. So I'm going to go with Sanderson on that one, because I think that it is okay to have both a hard and a soft magic system. But if you do, then you need to consider how and why and how it all works, in the end. Card also talks about the boundaries that separate sci-fi from fantasy, and I'm going to go through a few of them here. He says that all stories that belong in the future or belong at a planet that we haven't visited yet, that they belong to either sci-fi or fantasy. Card also talks about the division between sci-fi and fantasy. And he says that fantasy, obviously it can contain magic and creatures that we don't know anything about. But with science fiction instead, so let's say that we know how to revive someone from the dead. And in a sci-fi story, it will be the technology that has come so far that makes it possible for us to get someone to come back from the dead. But in a fantasy story, it would instead be magic or some kind of mystery that would do that. And one of the most interesting parts of the book was when Card talked about the four elements that every story has to contain. These four things are milieu, idea, character, and event. And even though all stories contain these things, different stories will lean more heavily on one or the other. And this was also something that I haven't really thought about that before, but of course it's true. In a lot of contemporary romance stories, they lean a lot on character development and maybe a little bit on setting, while there are other stories that lean heavily on the milieu or an idea. So it depends on what kind of writer you are. And to break them down for you, so the milieu of the story, it's the setting, it's the place where it's set, it's the world, it's the culture, the surroundings. And, all stories has some kind of setting. But in some stories, this is the setting is the most important thing for the writer. I think it was Dan Brown that said that he actually sees the locations where some of the scenes in his stories are set, that he sees them more as characters because they are so, unique, and they're such a big part of the story that they're their own characters almost, which is one example of an author that really cares about the milieu. The idea story instead is something that it's basically a story that where it starts with a question, and the entire story is the characters trying to find an answer to this question. It's a great way to create suspense in a story, I would say, especially if you can build up on that and leave the reader with some more questions, but also answer some of them along the way. that creates a great suspense throughout a story. And then there is the character story, of course. I already talked a little bit about this, but this is, character development with a very clear character arc. And the character's development is the main part of the story. I would say, though, that all stories preferably should contain some kind of character arc or character development, even if that is not the main focus of the story, just because, at least for me as a reader, see the story through the character's eyes, and I want to live it, and I want to grow with the characters when I read a book. So yeah, I do think character is very important for all stories. And then there is the event story. In an event story might be some kind of tradition that happens yearly, or some kind of event that unfolds that is the main focus of the story. And almost all fantasy stories uses some kind of event to, set the story in motion and to get it going. So it's a little bit, I guess, hard explaining it without reading it out loud to you. But all in all, I think that this was a good book. It's not my favorite book on how to write fantasy and sci-fi, but it was a really good book. I learned a lot from it, and it got me thinking on how I create, my worlds and my fantasy stories. I think like one of the key elements that I really liked was at the end of the book, Card started talking about what you should do if you want to write long term. He talks a lot about the fact that discipline has to come from within the writer, and that if you want to write long term, there are no shortcuts. You have to sit down and just write continuously again and again, and rewrite and work. Like almost all successful authors keep on coming back to. And another thing that he mentions is that for us who want to write long term, we should also make sure to take care of our bodies, go for a walk or stretch or move, because sitting down and writing, it's not healthy for us to be this still, and it's easy to, for your shoulders to go up like this and for your back to hurt. So take care of yourselves. For those of you who've actually come this far in the video, I wanted to ask you, do you want me to do more mini reviews of books that I read for my my university classes, or do you think it's a little bit more like that? Because this was basically a trial run. As you could tell, I've read books that are better on storytelling and that are better on how to write fantasy, but it was a good book. Don't get me wrong, I liked it. I really did, but yeah, and also like my brain is almost fried because I read so many books right now for university classes. But if you want me to do more reviews like this, let me know in the comments, and I will continue. Otherwise, I will probably get back to the normal videos that I make about writing, and yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!